I don't understand. Now, I've listened to a lot of hawks on the American side talk about, well, two things, about the fact that it appears likely, and this is independent of the merits of this claim, it appears likely that the Ukraine, supported by the West in the manner it has been supported, can do serious damage to Russia's conventional arms force. And I think there is evidence that the Ukrainians and the West are pushing the Russians back, and God only knows how far that will go. And the hawks that I've talked to said that's a good thing. It's in our interest to ensure that Russia is no longer a conventional military threat. And no, I have a certain degree of sympathy for that viewpoint. But then here's the counter problem as I see it. So I try to look forward into the future, and I think, okay, what is a victory for the West look like? Forget about Ukraine. Ukraine victory is they get their territory back, and there's a wall between them and the Russians, and the pesky Russians leave them alone, and they go back to whatever level of appalling corruption they had managed before the war. Right. And so that's the Ukraine victory. The West, well, let's say we could do this two ways. Okay, so Putin is deposed, however that happens, and then what? And then we have a better leader in Russia? We have a more trustworthy leader? Yeah, I don't think so. The Russians haven't got a great history of that, and no matter what you think of Putin, it's definitely the case that he isn't the worst leader that emerged in Russia in the last 100 years by any measure. True. So that's a big problem. And then I think, well, instead of Putin being replaced by someone who could be better, but probably won't be, we'll have a Russia that's really fragmented, and that, the country in some ways collapses. And that's a really bad idea because there's a lot of nuclear bombs there. And if you get the fragmentation of that power structure into multiple chieftains, let's say, and a few of them emerge armed with nuclear bombs, then we have a major problem on our hands. And that seems to me to be a highly likely outcome. And then if we weaken Russia severely and permanently, then we have the problem of a severely and permanently weakened Russia. And that's a big problem because they produce a lot of fertilizer, and the Europeans happen to be dependent on them for a lot of their energy needs. So that doesn't look very wise. And then we have the absolute bloody catastrophic probability that if Putin starts to lose in any serious way, and so starts to believe that Russian territorial integrity is threatened, however he defines that he has an immense array of unbelievably powerful next generation weapons at his disposal, and why the hell wouldn't he use them? And yes. So let's walk through that. I mean, imagine the West wins. Okay, what does that mean? I don't see what that means. I haven't heard anyone describe to me what the goal of this war is. We're supporting the heroic Ukrainians. It's like, yeah, you're a moralizing scoundrel. That's not a plan. That's idiot hand-waving, as bad as the environmental, doomsayers. It's the same thing. Cheap moral victory. Can you make a pro and then a cautionary war case in relationship to the Russia and Ukraine? What's in America's true interests as far as you're concerned?
Well, this is exactly, you have very clearly laid out not only the problem with how this President Biden and frankly, Democrat and Republican leaders in Congress who are applauding and pushing for and escalating this war is how short-sighted they are. But also, this has been the problem in U.S. foreign policy from our leaders for so long is they are not actually thinking clearly, if they're thinking at all, about what is our goal? What is our objective? Yeah. What you said, what does a win look like? How is it defined?
Even theoretically.
Even theoretically,
yeah.
Whether it's realistic or not, just saying, well, we're fighting for democracy. That's not a goal. Also, it's in direct conflict with the reality of their actions, even here in the United States, about how many undemocratic decisions and increasingly authoritarian decisions they are making. But on this question of the war what is essentially a proxy war against Russia, the United States is waging a proxy war against Russia. The Ukrainian people are paying the price. They have not outlined what a win looks like. Anytime anyone asks President Biden or anyone in the Biden administration is, when does this end? How does this end? They throw out this cheap one-liner of saying, well, that's up to Putin. Whenever Putin stops.
Oh, good. That's good. That's up to the guy with the hydrogen bombs.
Exactly.
That's bloody brilliant. Look, I know what I would do if I was Putin. I know it. As soon as I felt that I was in danger of a true loss. See, I think Putin will settle for the devastation of Ukraine. I think he could claim that as a victory. The utter devastation of the Ukraine, because it stays out of Western hands. But if Putin ever believed that his people even believed that they were now under attack, let's say by German tanks, let's say, the probability that he's used a tactical battlefield nuclear weapon seems to me to be extraordinarily high. It's like, well...
It is.
For me, it's like, well, why wouldn't he? And the issue is, well, you don't want to escalate. It's like, yeah, that's already factored into the decision. So
there is this theory, I don't know if you've heard it before, of escalate to de-escalate. And so the response from the U.S. government is always, well, we don't think he'll resort to that, or we don't think that we're not sure. I even hear people say, well, we're not even sure that his nuclear weapons are that great, or will really work in the way that we think could cause major damage. But the fact that they're even theorizing about any of this without recognizing the very direct and real cost to human civilization on this planet is exactly the problem. They're living in some fantasy land that it's hard to connect. It's hard to connect with because it's not based in the reality of the situation you're facing. And you have laid it out very clearly of the different possible outcomes. We've heard President Biden say, and others in the Department of Defense, well, we got to get rid of that guy, Putin, but not actually.
For what? For who? For who?
For who? And to what end? To what is the alternative? They have no idea who will step up or what kind of Russia will exist in the aftermath of that. We can look throughout history to see how U.S. foreign policy, especially in regime change wars, have failed so spectacularly in different regions around the world because they go and pick which dictator they like or don't like. Well, we'll take this guy out, replace him with this guy. And then all of these disastrous unintended negative consequences come both for the United States and the people in these countries. And yet here we are now where we are facing that exact same prospect with the country that has the most nuclear weapons in the entire world.